So what should you expect for the housing market for the rest of 2021? That's what we're going to discuss in today's video. Right now, it is February 22nd, so we're about a month and a half into 2021, but we're already getting some very telling signs as to what we should expect in this real estate market this year. A couple of days ago, we received data on existing home sales that showed existing home sales were up nearly 24% year over year. So from last January to this January, up nearly 24%. And at the same time, median home prices rose nearly 14% during that same time. So that basically shows you that we had a very, very strong housing market in 2020, which most of you know at this point. But is that going to carry over into 2021? That's what we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail, give you some ideas of what you should expect if you're a buyer or seller in this market. And also, who are the buyers right now? Is it millennial buyers? Is it first-time home buyers? Is it investors? Is it move-up buyers? What's driving this market? We're going to take a little bit of time and talk about that as well. But before we do that, I want to take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Jeb Smith. I'm a real estate broker for nearly 18 years here in Southern California. My channel is all about real estate, helping guide you through that process. So do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. So let's start today's video by talking a little bit about what we're experiencing right now in the housing market. Now, I started off the video by telling you that in January, we reported existing home sales of nearly 24%. And at the same time, we saw that median home sales or median home prices had grew nearly 14% last year. But is that really an indicator of what we should expect as we move into the rest of the year? And the answer is yes, in a lot of ways. Typically, our years, January, the beginning of the year, don't necessarily start off as the strongest time of the year. You know, normally our strong housing market, the best time of the year with regards to housing is normally that spring summer market. But when we start seeing a year start off with very, very high numbers like this, it's a likely indicator of what you're to expect during the rest of the year, because those numbers for January, December, January are typically the slowest months of the year with regards to real estate sales. And when you start seeing gangbuster numbers coming out of the gate with that type of growth, it's a likely indicator that you're going to, experience something very similar for months to come. And that is mainly being driven by low supply and high buyer demand, which we've talked about several times in numerous videos. Now, recently we've seen that interest rates have risen just a bit, somewhere around 0.25% in most cases. And that's because we've seen pressures on the 10-year Treasury note. Typically, when we see a rise in the 10-year Treasury, we also see a rise in interest rates. And that's essentially what we've seen over the last week or so. But the moves haven't been as crazy as what the news is making it to be, or, what you're reading or watching on TV. The moves, again, are somewhere around 0.25%, which at the end of the day isn't anything that's going to really affect the housing market. Because at the same time, we still have a very, very low supply of homes. The latest report that I saw said that we are carrying somewhere around a 1.9 month supply of homes. That means in 1.9 months, so let's say 2 months, if no new homes came to the market, we essentially wouldn't have any homes to sell. Now let's take a moment and compare that to 2008, because a lot of people want to compare what we're going through right now to 2008. 2008, we had over a 10.5 month supply of homes. So 10.5 months versus right now less than 2 months. Entirely different equation. That time you had builders overbuilding property. There was this oversupply of homes. Interest rates were much higher than they are right now. There were adjustable loans, there were neg-am loans. There were a lot of things going on during that time that were driving that market. We don't have those things right now. Right now, we have a supply and demand imbalance, which is what is driving the housing market. In addition to that, you have low interest rates. That is adding that fuel to the fire and really pushing home sales up, allowing, new home buyers to get into the market. And that's what's really driving the housing market. Now, at the beginning of the video, I asked you who is making up this large buyer pool. Who are the buyers coming into the market at this time? And right now, it's first-time home buyers, primarily millennial buyers, making up that first-time home buyer pool. But the first-time home buyers made up nearly 33% of the sales in January of this year. So 1/3 of the sales going right now are first-time home buyers just entering the market. And we've talked about this in other videos as well, is that the millennials right now are becoming prime buying age. There have been millennials buying for years that are now also move-up buyers, but the large majority of that demographic has reached the prime buying age, and they're starting to enter the market, which is adding that fuel to the fire and adding to that demand. In addition to that, you have people that are able to work from home, that no longer have to go into the office, so they can work anywhere. These people are moving out of these densely populated areas to areas that they never would have considered before, which is driving up home prices in other areas, even out of state, because you still have people working in, say, California that can now live in Arizona or Texas or Idaho or what have you, where homes are less expensive or traditionally less expensive in most cases. So you're starting to see this migration pattern, which is adding, sales in areas that weren't booming before, and giving buyers other opportunities to buy property less expensively than maybe the state that they were living in prior. And this is adding to that supply imbalance. This is not just something that's happening in Southern California. This is happening all over the United States. And it's something that is likely to continue, because you're going to have these migration patterns continue. You're going to have interest rates stay low. And a lot of people keep talking about foreclosures. Well, what happens when foreclosures come to the market? What happens when forbearance ends? Those are two different things, in my opinion. Forbearance and foreclosures aren't the same thing. So let's address the foreclosure question up front. What happens when these foreclosures come to the market? Well, as of January, less than 1% of the sales in the month of January were actually foreclosures. So right now, none of the property really selling is foreclosures or distress sales. And that's primarily due to the moratoriums that are in place. We recently got an update from President Biden that that they're extending the eviction and foreclosure moratorium. The foreclosure moratorium is being extended through the end of June at this time. The eviction moratorium in most states ends in March. In California, it's actually pushed out a little bit further. But what happens when those moratoriums come due and they can start the foreclosure process? Well, I personally think it's going to continue. I think it's going to be extended for, a period of time. I don't know how long, but I think this is something that continues to get extended for some time. But if you live in a state like California, a very litigious state, it takes a lot to actually go through the foreclosure process. It's not as simple as that date ends and your house gets foreclosed upon. You still have to file notice of defaults. You still have to do the trustee sale. There's time, there's months that happens, years sometimes in the cases that, from the start of the foreclosure to the time that the foreclosure actually takes place. So this is something that is going to take years to go through in a lot of cases, especially if the number of foreclosures is anywhere close to what people expect. Now, other states, it might be a faster process, but here in California, it's going to take some time to go through that. So don't sit on the sidelines thinking that you're going to buy a foreclosure for 50 cents on the dollar. For one, you've got a lot of competition out there. Buyer demand is high. If these properties came on the market less than fair market value, you're going to have a flurry of people trying to buy them. But at the same time, you're also going to be competing with investors, cash buyers that are going to be trying to buy these properties. So, if you're one of those people sitting on the sidelines thinking that those foreclosures are coming and you're going to get a deal, I would tell you to think again. Likely not going to happen. Now, the second part of that question is what happens when forbearance ends? Well, forbearance is another thing that continues to get extended in a lot of cases, and it's hard to say what actually will happen when forbearance ends, but what we do know as of right now is that the large majority of people exiting forbearance are actually paying their mortgages on time. So they're not defaulting, they're not having to foreclose or what have you at this point. They're actually paying their mortgages on time based on the numbers that are out so far. But what happens if they're not able to pay their mortgages on time? Well, the large majority of these people have equity in their property. Homeowners have more equity than they've ever had in the history of ownership of property. So there's a lot of equity in property. And now For you, those of you who are going to say that, well, their missed payments are basically taking a portion of that equity up and they're going to end up owing more on the property than it's worth. That would be true if you saw properties depreciating, properties coming down in value. When you see properties continuing to go up in value, again, the median home price last year rose nearly 14%. It was actually 14.1%. So at the same time, these people are missing their mortgage payments and being able to add them to the back of their loan in some cases. At the same time, their property's appreciating. So if they had equity to start and their property's appreciating, yes, they're going to owe those past mortgage payments, but chances are it's not really tapping into the equity that they had because they're gaining appreciation as well. Now, if we start to see properties coming down in value and this forbearance continuing to get extended further and further, then maybe that becomes an issue. But right now, I don't foresee that being a problem. And with that, if these people are in trouble and they can't come out, work out an agreement with their lender, they're in a position to sell their property, right? They'd probably rather take that equity that's in the property, put it in their pocket and go rent something versus just letting it go to, to the lender in a foreclosure. So, I don't foresee foreclosures or forbearance being a problem anytime in the near future. But as more information comes on that, I'll continue to keep you updated. So the real question is, what should we expect as we move into the rest of the year? A lot of the economists out there are expecting somewhere around a 5% appreciation. There are other people expecting somewhere around a 10% appreciation. So I would say that you're probably going to see somewhere between 5 and 10% in appreciation through 2021. Maybe some markets you see higher. Some markets you see a little bit less, but I would say probably somewhere between 5 and 7% is realistic and probably a little conservative on those estimates. Now, a lot of you are going to ask, so when is the best time to buy a property? The best time to buy a property right now is when you can find one that checks the boxes that of what you're looking for in a home. The payment makes sense, all of that good stuff. Now, I expect as we move further into the spring housing market, typically right now we're kind of moving into that spring market right now, but we're not really seeing the increases in inventory that we would normally see because just as many properties that are coming on the market, we see that many properties going into escrow. So inventory isn't really starting to build, but I would imagine as things heat up in some of these areas, right now we've had, winter, these crazy winters in Texas and across the United States that a lot of these places have never even seen before. And so I think as a lot of these places start to thaw out, more people start to get the vaccine, we start to see those numbers improve. I think you're going to see more inventory come to the market. With that inventory coming to the market, you're likely to see home sales pick up, you're likely to see demand pick up, and you're likely to see homes selling, over the asking price with multiple offers. A lot of what we've seen up to this point, but maybe even accentuated in some cases because of the amount of demand that's out there. So I expect the rest of 2021 to be a very, very strong housing market. It's going to be cyclical. Spring and summer are going to be, hot housing market. You're going to see it slow down as we move into the fall and the winter, just like we normally would. And I'm not ready to tell you what 2022 looks like at this point, but I can tell you if supply stays low and interest rates stay low, it's likely to look like 2021. But for now, that's where we are in the housing market. I'm interested to hear your take. If you have thoughts on the housing market, think I'm crazy, whatever it is, would love to hear your comments below and back them up. Tell me where you're getting that information. I'd love to read this. I'm happy to have that dialogue and that conversation going back and forth. But for now, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I appreciate the support. Hope that was helpful. We'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.